72 hours after the grid goes down, the military will know exactly where to go. They've had the list for decades. The fuel storage nodes, the communications relay points, the highway choke points they need to control troop and supply movement. They will go there first, not because they want your resources, because they cannot execute without them. Here's what that means for you. Every location on their priority list is a location where civilian access gets compressed, redirected, or eliminated. New Orleans, 2005. A colonel personally called an energy company and ordered power crews diverted to a fuel pipeline serving the military before civilians had water. The order came from the vice president's office. This is not a theory, it's in the congressional record. Today, I'm going to show you the 3 location categories the military will secure first in any declared national emergency. And then I'm going to show you exactly where you need to be instead, based on the same logic they use to build their priority list. Here's what most people don't understand about declared national emergencies. The government doesn't improvise. It executes a priority list that's been written, refined, and exercised for decades. The Defense Production Act, signed in 1950, used 300,000 times per year by the Pentagon in peacetime, gives the president the authority to require any private business to fulfill government contracts ahead of civilian orders. All food, all fuel, all communications infrastructure, all water resources. The president doesn't need a new law to take what the military needs. The law is already there. It's been there since Truman. What changes in an emergency is the speed of execution. This isn't classified. It's published in federal statute and executive orders. It's just written in the kind of language that nobody reads until it's too late. I went through the Defense Production Act, 3 executive orders, the 2005 Katrina After Action reports, the Pentagon's own Strategic Infrastructure Assessment documents, and Northcom's published Civil Support Doctrine. What I found is a pattern that's been consistent through every major domestic emergency in the last 80 years. 3 location categories. In every case, Katrina, Sandy, the LA riots, 9/11, government and military resources moved to these 3 nodes first. Every time. Not because of chaos, because of doctrine. 3 locations. We start with the one they literally made a phone call from the vice president's office to secure. Location number 1. The fuel node. On the night of August 30th, 2005, Vice President Dick Cheney personally called the manager of the Southern Pines Electric Power Association. His order: divert power crews away from restoring civilian electricity and redirect them to substations serving the Colonial Pipeline, a fuel artery running from Texas to the northeast. Civilians in New Orleans had no water. The pipeline had power within hours. Most people assume that in a crisis, the government distributes fuel to everyone. Gas stations, generators, hospitals. It's a shared resource. They'd never cut off civilian access. That assumption is wrong. And it's been wrong for decades. The military's operational capacity depends entirely on liquid fuel, not electricity, not food, jet fuel, diesel. The moment a national emergency is declared, fuel transitions from a commercial commodity to a military strategic resource. Executive Order 13,603 explicitly delegates authority over all forms of energy to the Secretary of Energy for national defense purposes. The Defense Production Act allows the government to place priority ratings on contracts, meaning military fuel contracts are filled before civilian ones. By statute, by design. Let me walk you through the mechanism. The U.S. military operates on petroleum at a rate of approximately 300,000 barrels per day during active operations. Every major U.S. military base has fuel storage capacity designed for 30 to 90 days of independent operation. In a grid-down scenario, those reserves must be resupplied through the commercial pipeline network, which shares infrastructure with civilian fuel delivery. When the pipeline becomes a military priority, civilian delivery is subordinated, not optional, not negotiable. The priority rating system makes it law. The Colonial Pipeline supplies fuel for the entire U.S. Northeast. It's a strategic military logistics artery, and the Cheney call wasn't an improvisation. It was doctrine being executed in real time. This is documented in the White House's own Katrina After Action report. Power crews were redirected from civilian restoration to pipeline substations. The decision was made at the vice presidential level within 24 hours of landfall. Civilian electricity restoration was delayed. Military fuel logistics were prioritized. That's the hierarchy. And it happened again during Hurricane Sandy. Governor Christie declared a state of emergency. And National Guard units were deployed to enforce fuel rationing, limiting civilian access to 10 gallons per purchase. Gas stations not serving emergency vehicles were placed last in fuel allocation priority. Civilians were arrested for hoarding fuel. The rationing was enforced by military personnel under emergency authority, not requested, enforced. Here's the structural reality. Major fuel distributors, Colonial Pipeline, Buckeye Partners, Magellan Midstream operate under FERC-regulated agreements with the federal government that include emergency access provisions. These agreements are public record. The company's obligation to prioritize government orders over civilian delivery in a declared emergency is written into their operating licenses. The companies don't choose to comply. They're required to comply. So where do you need to be instead? The vulnerability is dependency on the commercial fuel distribution network. The counterposition is storing your own fuel outside that network, before the emergency triggers the priority access provisions. The practical stack looks like this: a 250 to 500-gallon diesel reserve. Diesel stores 12 to 24 months with PRID stabilizer and extends to 24 months or more with proper maintenance. A diesel generator for primary power. A gravity-fed heating system that doesn't depend on electric fuel pumps. This eliminates your dependency on the commercial network entirely. When the military redirects pipeline capacity, you're not in the line. You're not in the rationing system. You're not competing for the resource they're seizing. And here's the geographic principle. Position yourself at least 50 miles from any major pipeline terminal, fuel depot, or refinery complex. These are the nodes the military secures first and restricts civilian access to first. FEMA's National Pipeline Mapping System is public. You can access it. Map the 50-mile radius around every major terminal in your region. That's your exclusion zone. If you're inside it, you're inside the acquisition radius. A fuel distributor in rural Montana put it this way: "We don't have a pipeline here, we have tanks. When Sandy happened, we watched the news. We didn't run out of anything. That's the whole point of being here. You've taken yourself out of the fuel acquisition radius. Your generator runs. Your heat runs. You're not standing in a rationed line. But fuel is only 1/3 of the priority list." The second location category is the one that makes everything else possible for them, and impossible for you if you're in the wrong place when it activates. Location number 2, the communications relay. During Hurricane Katrina, FEMA cut the Jefferson Parish emergency communications line, not the enemy, FEMA. The parish sheriff discovered the cut, restored it, and posted armed deputies to keep federal personnel away from it. That event is documented in the U.S. House Select Committee's report, A Failure of Initiative. When the federal government decided it needed communications control, it started with the line connecting civilians to their own emergency services. Most people think that cell towers might go down in a disaster. Infrastructure damage, bad luck. The government isn't trying to control communications. That's the comfortable story. Here's the real one. Communications control is not a byproduct of emergency response. It is the mechanism of emergency response. Add to the population that cannot communicate, cannot coordinate, cannot organize, cannot verify what is true, and the legal authority for that control is already in place. Executive Order 13,618, signed by Obama in July 2012, gives the Department of Homeland Security authority over private communications networks during national emergencies. The language is specific. It authorizes the federal government to prioritize, restore, and reconstitute communication systems. That means federal entities can commandeer bandwidth, tower capacity, and internet routing in declared emergencies. Not request. Commandeer, and the infrastructure is more concentrated than most people realize. The U.S. internet routes through approximately 40 major internet exchange points. The largest in Ashburn, Virginia, Chicago, Dallas, Los Angeles, New York, handle over 80% of domestic internet traffic. These nodes are designated critical infrastructure under Presidential Policy Directive 21. In a national emergency, federal authority over these nodes is explicit and documented. Control 5 buildings and you control 80% of American internet traffic. Here's how this already works in practice. During 9/11, cell networks in New York and Washington became saturated within minutes. Civilian calls were dropped while government and emergency channels were prioritized. The FCC's Government Emergency Telecommunications Service, GETS, and its Wireless Priority Service protocols give federal, state, and local government officials preemptive access to cellular bandwidth that bumps civilian calls. Your call drops, their call connects. This isn't contingency planning. This is active policy, right now. The Katrina numbers tell the full story. 38 of 911 call centers in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama were knocked out. 50% of area radio stations went off air. 3 million customer phone lines went down. And the military's communications, operating on separate hardened infrastructure, remained fully functional. The asymmetry between military and civilian communication capability in a collapse is built by design, not accident. And the telecom companies are not neutral parties. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile operate under FCC licenses that include mandatory emergency cooperation provisions. They are required by law to participate in priority access systems. Their obligation to deprioritize civilian traffic in favor of government communications during declared emergencies is a license condition, not a voluntary choice. A requirement. The vulnerability is dependency on commercial cellular and internet infrastructure. The counterposition is a personal communication stack that operates outside that infrastructure entirely. Ham radio. A properly equipped ham station with a 100-watt HF transceiver and an end-fed wire antenna can communicate across the continental United States without a single piece of commercial infrastructure. No cell tower, no internet, no satellite, no company that can be ordered to deprioritize your traffic. The FCC technician license is 35 questions, $15, and valid for 10 years. The general license opens HF bands for continental and global communication. There is no reason not to have both. Meshtastic. These are LoRa-based mesh networking devices that cost under $40 each. They create an off-grid, decentralized text messaging network using unlicensed 915 MHz spectrum. No cell towers, no internet, no FCC license required to receive. A network of 10 people within 5 miles of each other creates independent local communications that no federal authority can shut down, because there is no centralized node to shut down, and both devices go inside a Faraday cage. A metal garbage can lined with cardboard insulation costs $30. What survives an EMP event inside that can is your entire communication capability when everyone around you has none. The geographic principle is the same as location 1. Do not position yourself adjacent to major cell towers, internet exchange points, or broadcast transmission facilities. These are the infrastructure nodes DHS will prioritize for federal access. During Katrina, the areas with the most communications infrastructure, downtown New Orleans, were the areas where federal communications control was most aggressively asserted. The infrastructure that connects you in peacetime is the infrastructure they control in an emergency. Open a new tab right now. Search GETS Wireless Priority Service, FCC. Read the first result. It's a government page. Read the section on who gets priority access when the network is saturated. Then ask yourself what happens to your calls. You have fuel. You have communications that bypass their control infrastructure. You are operationally independent on 2 of the 3 dimensions. The third is the one that physically determines whether you can move at all, or whether you end up stationary while they redirect traffic around you. Location 3 is the one most people are standing in right now without knowing it. Location number 3, the highway choke point. The interstate highway system was not built for you. Dwight Eisenhower built it because he watched Germany use its Autobahn to move armor and troops faster than the Allies could respond. He watched the 1919 military convoy across America take 62 days to cross the country on civilian roads. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956 created the interstate system explicitly for military logistics and civilian evacuation in a nuclear attack. The same infrastructure you use for your commute is, by design, a military logistics network. When they need it, they've always had legal priority. Most people think highways are public. Nobody can close them. Maybe there are some traffic controls during a disaster, but you can always find a way through. That assumption has been tested, and it failed. At the Crescent City Connection Bridge during Katrina, Gretna Police and the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office physically blocked the bridge with armed officers, turning back thousands of evacuees crossing on foot from New Orleans. There was no food, water, or shelter in Gretna, the police chief said, but the blockade remained. This wasn't military. This was county law enforcement asserting territorial control over a critical choke point. And it happened within 48 hours of landfall. The evacuees had nowhere to go. The military does this at a different scale entirely. Joint Publication 3-28, Defense Support of Civil Authorities, is Northcom's published doctrine for domestic operations. It gives military commanders authority to establish military support corridors on civilian highways during declared emergencies. These corridors restrict civilian access to enable unimpeded military movement. The doctrine is public. The corridors are not announced in advance. You find out they exist when you're turned back at a checkpoint. This isn't new. 1919, military convoy, 62 days to cross America. Eisenhower takes notes. 1956, the interstate system is funded as a military logistics network. 1992, Los Angeles, Operation Garden Plot. National Guard units and active duty military deployed to control LA's major highway interchanges. Access was restricted at the I-10/I-110 interchange, the I-405 corridor, and multiple surface street choke points. Civilians attempting to move through those corridors without authorization were turned back. 2005. New Orleans. The Crescent City connection is blockaded at gunpoint within 48 hours. The pattern is not new. The pattern is doctrine. And here's the math that should concern you. The highest density urban areas, Los Angeles Basin, New York Metro, Chicago Metro, Dallas-Fort Worth, Miami, are also where the highest concentration of critical highway interchanges exist. A city of 10 million people served by 12 major highway interchanges is 12 control points from total mobility restriction. Control 12 intersections and 10 million people go nowhere. The math is not favorable. The funding structure makes this permanent. Highway construction and maintenance is funded 90% federally through the Highway Trust Fund. Federal funding means federal authority in declared emergencies. The roads were built with federal money for dual-use purposes. The federal government's right to restrict access in a national emergency is not contested. It's engineered into the system from the day the concrete was poured. The vulnerability is living in or near a high-density urban area where your mobility depends on a small number of controlled highway interchanges. The counterposition is geography that eliminates the choke point problem before the emergency creates it. Rural areas with multiple secondary road options, county roads, Forest Service roads, state routes, provide mobility redundancy that high-density urban areas structurally cannot offer. A position with 4 to 6 independent route options to resupply points is not controllable with the resources a typical National Guard deployment has available. You don't need to outrun the military. You need to be in a place where the cost of controlling your movement exceeds the benefit. Here's the density math. Military civil disturbance doctrine prioritizes population density. An area with 6 people per square mile requires 100 times the resources to control as an area with 600 people per square mile. Low-density geography is not just preferable. It is structurally resistant to the control mechanisms that work in urban environments. And the counterposition is not bug out when it happens. It is already be there. A position stocked for 90 to 180 days eliminates the need to move through any controlled corridor during the critical window when choke points are active. You don't need the highway if you're already on the other side of it. One more thing, the collapse doesn't reward isolation. It rewards pre-positioned networks. A rural community of 50 households with established relationships, divided labor, and shared resources is more resilient than any lone individual with perfect gear. The network is the asset. Build it before you need it. A rancher in central Wyoming who runs 400 head on land with no interstate access put it simply. The last time anything happened here, I watched it on TV. Not because I didn't care, because there was nothing here for anyone to want to control. That's the whole strategy. Be somewhere that isn't on the priority list. Pull up Google Maps. Find the 2 nearest interstate highway interchanges to your home. Mark them. Now count your secondary route options, county roads, state routes, anything not on the interstate grid. If you have fewer than 3 independent routes out of your area, that's the gap you need to solve. Let's step back and look at what we've just covered. 3 location categories: fuel nodes, communications relays, highway choke points. And I want you to notice something. They're not 3 separate things. They're one system. The fuel nodes power the military's operational capacity. The communications relays give them command and control. The highway choke points give them freedom of movement and deny it to you. Take any one of those 3, and the military's ability to respond is degraded. Control all 3, and civilian movement, communication, and energy supply can be shaped without a single explicit order requiring it. That's not a conspiracy. That's logistics doctrine. It's been the doctrine since World War II. Here's what that means for your positioning decision. The counter positions aren't 3 separate preps. They're one integrated posture. Fuel independence means you're not competing for the resource they're seizing. Communication independence means you're not dependent on the network they're commandeering. Geographic positioning means you're not in the corridor they're restricting. These aren't parallel strategies. They're the same strategy expressed 3 different ways. Remove yourself from the acquisition radius. You now understand the 3 priority nodes and the counter positions for each. Here's what the rest of this conversation has to address, because most channels won't. The legal authority to seize these nodes exists in peacetime. The Defense Production Act is used 300,000 times per year by the Pentagon right now, in the absence of any emergency. The emergency doesn't create the authority, It accelerates the use of authority that already exists. Your window is not before an emergency. Your window is now. Geographic positioning is a long-led time decision. You cannot execute a counter-position to Location 3, the highway choke point problem, in 72 hours. The Gretna Bridge closed 48 hours after Katrina made landfall. By then, the decision about where to be had already been made for the people who didn't make it themselves. If you're living in a high-density urban area served by a handful of interstate interchanges, the time to change that is not the week after a grid failure. It's this year. And here's the honest part. The counter positions are accessible at different economic thresholds. A ham radio is $300. A diesel reserve is $3,000. Land in a low-density geography is $50,000 to $500,000 depending on where. This video tells you what to do. It doesn't pretend the timeline or the capital requirements are trivial. So here's the resolution I can offer honestly. Start with what you can do this week. Not all three. 1. The communication stack is the most accessible and the most immediately actionable. The fuel reserve is second. The geography is the long game, but the long game starts with a decision, not a down payment. None of these systems have failed yet. The Cheney Colonial Pipeline call was 2005. The Gretna Bridge was 2005. The Executive Order 13,603 authority is live right now. The window between the authority exists and the authority is exercised against you personally is the only window you have. Most people will spend that window deciding whether to believe this is real. That decision is not neutral. It's a position. 3 locations: fuel, communications, movement corridors, documented legal authority, documented historical execution, one integrated control system that activates the moment a national emergency is declared, and sometimes before. The government does not publicize the priority list, not because it's classified, because it doesn't need to. The law is public. The doctrine is public. The history is public. What's missing is someone who reads all 3 and tells you what it adds up to. You are either in the acquisition radius or you're not. That's not a political position. It's a geometric one. The military is not your enemy. It is a logistics system executing a priority list it has refined for 80 years. When it executes, it doesn't ask who you voted for, what you've prepared, or how long you've been watching videos like this. It looks at the map and takes what it needs to function. The question is whether you're on that map. That's the only question. Make your answer now. 3 locations, 3 counter positions. Pick one this week. Not a purchase, a decision. The communication stack, the fuel reserve, the geographic reposition. You don't have to do all 3 this month. You have to start one today. Map the gap, then close it.